You work hard for your money, right? You put it in the bank and you trust that it's safe. But have you ever really truly stopped to think about what happens the second it leaves your hand? Where does it go? What does it do all day? Well, let's pull back the curtain because the answer is way more incredible than you might imagine.
I mean, it seems like a simple question. You put money in, you can take it back out. But that time in between, that's where the magic happens. Your money doesn't just sit in some dusty vault with your name on it. No way. It goes on this wild adventure that actually powers our entire economy.
See, at its heart, the entire financial system really only has one main job. It's a giant matchmaker. Its purpose is to take all the extra cash from savers, that's people like us or companies with profits, and perfectly channel it to borrowers who need that money to, buy a house or start a new business. That flow of money is literally the lifeblood of the economy.
And who's the number one matchmaker in this whole operation? Well, it's the first stop on our money's secret journey, and it's an institution we all know pretty well, the good old commercial bank. They're the critical go-betweens that make this whole thing work.
Now, to really get the secret sauce here, we first have to understand that your bank is kind of living a double life. It has two very simple but incredibly powerful core functions.
On one hand, the bank is your money's safe house. It takes in deposits from all of us and promises to keep them safe. But on the other hand, its actual business, the way it makes money, is by lending that very same money out to other people and charging interest. It's this constant balancing act between taking money in and pushing money out that, well, it sets the stage for something truly amazing. All right, here we go. This is probably the most mind-bending part of this whole story. Banks don't just move money around. They don't just transfer it from a saver to a borrower. In the process of doing their everyday job, they actually literally create brand new money. Let's walk through how they do it. So to make this super clear, we're going to follow the adventure of a single deposit. Let's say you walk into your bank and deposit $10,000. The clock starts now. Okay, before your bank can do a single thing with your 10 grand, it has to follow a very important rule. This rule comes from a higher power, and it's called the cash reserve ratio. All this means is that banks are legally required to keep a certain percentage of all deposits on hand, in reserve. They absolutely cannot lend this part out. For our example, let's just say that ratio is 10%. So what happens to your $10,000? Right away, the bank skims 10% off the top. That's $1,000 and puts it in the reserve vault. But what about the other $9,000? It doesn't just sit there. The bank immediately does what banks do best. It loans that $9,000 out to someone who needs it. Now, you might be thinking, okay, story's over, right? You've still got your $10,000 in your account and some other person has a $9,000 loan. But oh no, this is where the real journey is just getting started. See, that $9,000 loan isn't just a bag of cash. The bank actually creates a brand new account for the borrower and just poof, deposits $9,000 into it. Now, that borrower goes out and spends it. Maybe they buy a car. The car dealership gets the $9,000 and what do? They deposit it into their bank. And to that second bank, that $9,000 looks like any other brand new deposit. So what does that second bank do? You guessed it. It holds 10% in reserve, that's $900, and loans out the rest, $8,100. That loan gets spent, then deposited in a third bank, which then loans out a chunk of it, and on and on and on. This incredible ripple effect means that your single initial $10,000 deposit can eventually become as much as $100,000 circulating in the economy. Now, this isn't some kind of voodoo, it's just math. There's a formula for it, and it's called the deposit multiplier. You just take the initial deposit and multiply it by 1 divided by that reserve ratio. So for us, that's $10,000 times 1 divided by 0.10, which gives us that jaw-dropping $100,000 figure. This simple formula is the engine of money creation. So if commercial banks are out there creating all this new money, you've got to ask, who's in charge here? Who sets that super important reserve ratio in the first place? Well, that brings us to the top of the pyramid, the ultimate rule maker, the central bank. Think of the central bank as the final boss. It's the only institution that can actually print physical cash. It's the bank for all the other banks. It handles the government's money. And really, its most important job is just to keep the entire financial system stable and healthy. It's the guardian of the entire economy. And to do that big job, the central bank has a powerful set of tools, Altogether, these tools are called monetary policy, and it's basically how they control the total amount of money in the economy, which in turn affects everything from inflation to jobs.
And here's what that toolkit looks like. If the economy is sluggish and needs a boost, the central bank can lower that reserve ratio. That lets banks lend out a bigger slice of every deposit, which creates more money. But if the economy is running too hot and they're worried about inflation, they do the exact opposite. They raise the ratio, which forces banks to hold more cash and slows down lending. It's all about either stepping on the gas or hitting the brakes.
Okay, so we figured out how money is created and how it's managed from the top down. But where does all this new money actually go to get put to work? Well, it flows into two huge marketplaces. First up, you have the money market. Think of this as the place for short-term needs, loans that last just a few days or months. It's all about making sure businesses have the cash on hand to operate day to day. Then you have the capital market. This is for the big stuff, the long-term funding for massive investments through things like stocks and bonds. This is where money goes to literally build the future. So, the next time you think about your bank account, try not to picture it as just a passive storage locker for your cash. The whole system is an active, dynamic, living engine. It takes in our deposits and, through the simple act of lending, it multiplies that money to fuel everything around us. Your money is always on a journey. And all of this reveals the very pulse of our modern economy. But it also leaves us with one final, really provocative question to think about. If the act of lending is what creates almost all of the money in the system, what happens to that engine when everyone, people and businesses, get scared and just stops borrowing? What happens then?